We're just going to jump right into it with 1991. I think 91 was one of the first years where the WWE had two amazing matches to choose from. So if you had to pick what was the best match from 91, Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect from SummerSlam, or Ultimate Warrior versus Macho Man Randy Savage from WrestleMania, which one is the better match?
In my opinion, I'd pick Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect. I think this was one of the first big, marquee matchups for Bret the Hitman Hart to really show his technical prowess and really show how he could just craft a beautiful match and do different things in a match. There's also a great story behind this match that he talked about in one of the first compilation DVDs that they put out for Bret Hart. And Mr. Perfect actually had a really bad back going into this match. But he agreed to do the match, and he agreed to drop the belt. According to Bret, of course, it had a lot to do because Bret was the one that Perfect would be dropping the belt to. And I believe it because I think that Perfect and Bret always had great chemistry together. And in this, I think this is one of their best matches. It's probably definitely the most memorable match they ever had.
It's very, very important year because the SummerSlam match, I think it was very groundbreaking, especially for Bret. That was like the opening to his main event, tenure. It really opened a lot of doors. I think it was a very important match. But, the Ultimate Warrior's Macho Man match, that was very entertaining. It's one of those matches that's, it's famous. It has its own identity. I think even this year, Jay Lethal and Ring of Honor, I think him and Roderick Strong, I think they tried to reenact this match just for fun. So it is like they did so many things that are just, stick out as being funny and just, the elbow drops, Warrior, praying. Even we make fun of Warrior with, what was he doing? This is my destiny. Praying to the heavens above. He was like praying during the actual match, right? But, the WrestleMania 7 one, if you think about it, when people say WrestleMania moments, like Shawn Michaels winning the title or this guy winning a match winning the title, those aren't really the moments. But if you think about this match, this is like the best WrestleMania moment when you had Elizabeth, jump in and rescue Randy Savage, and you saw Savage and Elizabeth reunite. Like that was a moment. You saw women in the crowd crying. So I don't know. It's tough to say, but I'm gonna have to go with Warrior and Savage.
You're picking Warrior and Savage?
I am, yeah.
Okay.
It's a tough one.
I'm gonna stick with Bret and Perfect, but I do find it. To your point, I do think it was a really cool WrestleMania moment, and at the time, I think people bought into it a lot more easily. And it had been 2 years, almost 2 full years since Elizabeth and Macho Man had been reunited. So Macho King finally went back to being the Macho Man. So, no, totally agree. A great moment, and probably the best match Warrior ever had.
All right, so list the nominees for 92.
1992, we had Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog for SummerSlam 92, the Royal Rumble match from that year, and Macho Man and Ric Flair from WrestleMania 8. So what is your pick?
I'm going to have to go with Bret and Bulldog from SummerSlam 92. Yeah, I mean, Nigel was in the crowd, Nigel McGuinness, and he said that match inspired him to become a pro wrestler. So that match had a big effect on people. This was just another Bret match where he proved himself to everybody. I think he even said to Vince McMahon, he said, if me and Davey go on last, we could have the greatest match of all time. And so I think that confidence, I think this is the match where Bret won over Vince, and Vince was confident that Bret was going to be the guy for, the next 5 years. So I got to go with that. The Rumble, 92 Rumble's greatest Rumble of all time with Flair just going out there and, with, such a great cast of characters and just having such an, colorful and animated Royal Rumble match. And, Flair crying after the Rumble was another moment. So that's really tough between those matches. I don't think Macho Man and Flair from WrestleMania is in the same league as the other two, but if that's a distant third.
That's a tough one for me because I think what happens after the Macho Man Ric Flair match is more entertaining than anything in any of those three matches because Ric Flair just goes apeshit, whether it's in the ring or backstage. No, as far as wrestling is concerned, I'm gonna pick Bret Hart and British Bulldog. It was just such a special match. Everything was just so fine tuned, and everything was so everything flowed in that match. Even when Bret goes over. the top rope. He does a springboard over the top rope, and British Bulldog is actually not standing where he's supposed to be. Bret turns it into sort of this half Nelson cradle thing, and he just like brings him down.
Right, whenever Bret talks about
really
the match,
cool.
though, doesn't he always mention how Davey forgot this and he had to like protect himself from hitting?
But when you watch it back, it doesn't matter. Bret was able to sort of make up for that because Davey wasn't the greatest.
No, I just think it's funny because I know Bret loves the match, but whenever he talks about it, he kind of craps on it at the same time. So I just think that's kind of fun.
Well, he was kind of a perfectionist, but it was no.
He was also critical of Davey, like the way he reacted at the end when he was trying to leave the ring. Mm-hmm. Bret felt like he could have got more heat if Davey I don't know. I guess he looked the wrong way or whatever. So I know he was upset about that. So that's just like you said, Bret's a perfectionist. But all right, so move on to '93. '93 is kind of a weak year for me. It's Bret Hart versus Mr. Perfect from King of the Ring, which that to me that's their best match. Like I've talked about plenty of times. It's pretty underrated. But the match that won Match of the Year in PWI Magazine was one of the Shawn Michaels Marty Jannetty matches from Raw. I'm not sure which one it was, but I think Jannetty pulled off the upset in May, and then in July, Shawn Michaels won it back with the help of Diesel. I don't know. To me, the Jannetty Shawn Michaels matches were good. That's when Shawn started really going crazy with the overselling, so that kind of hurt it for me. But what did you think of '93?
I thought '93 was a weak year. It had a weak WrestleMania. I think one of the reasons why is because instead of just giving Bret the ball and running with it for a few more months, because of course at the time they would always have a face win out at WrestleMania. And they decided to go with Hogan at the last minute that year. I think it was a sign that Vince McMahon and WWE didn't really know which direction they wanted to go. I don't really have a pick. I love the HBK Marty Jannetty matches, but they were short. It's not like they were long. They weren't much longer than 15 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah. But they were solid matches.
Good Raw matches, yeah.
But at the time, 15 minutes was a lot on Monday Night Raw. Raw was only an hour long.
They're really the matches that kind of, made, kind of jump-started the Raw, If you look back to that first year, the best matches were Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty. So, all right, so we move on to 1994. 94 is pretty tough. You have three, 5-star matches that could all take it. You have Bret Hart versus Owen Hart from WrestleMania 10. You have Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon, the ladder match from WrestleMania 10, and then you got what a lot of people consider the greatest WWF match of all time, Bret Hart and Owen Hart from SummerSlam, the steel cage match. For me, I'm going to say my personal favorite is Bret Hart and Owen from WrestleMania. I don't know, I just love the Owen upset. I just love the the technicality of that match and the story going into it, with Owen finally snapping and turning heel. The brother versus brother storyline is a storyline that you could relate to as well. But what was your pick for, most people are going to say Shawn versus Razor because it really revolutionized the business. Mm-hmm. But what was your pick?
I'd pick Owen versus Bret from WrestleMania. I love everything. Wow. I love everything about that match. Not just from the time the time they come out to the time, at the very end when Owen, beats Bret, sort of catches Bret in his own roll up. And then Owen, he gives Bret the middle finger and he spits at him. And I just thought it was just so poetic to me. I just thought it was so, because Bret Hart, he was a great wrestler. He was that hero, that tragic hero. He gets beat by his own brother on the same night where he's, fighting for the WWF title. I thought it was huge for Owen. It was huge for Owen's career. And it was great. And maybe you can do a video some other time about why Owen Hart was never made WWF champion. Missed opportunity, in my opinion. I don't know why it didn't happen that year or within the next couple of years. But no, that's because Owen went over. I'm going to pick that one. That was great.
I think a lot of it had to do with Kevin Nash, but that's a different story. But what was? I know you're not a big fan of the steel cage match. Why is that? I mean, I could agree that it doesn't have a lot of replay value for me, but I still think, if you watched it for the first time, I could see why you think it's.
Well, you just said a replay value. The first time I watched it, I was really into it. I thought they did a really great, it was methodical and a really great psychological way of going over the cage, going over, not going over, back and forth. But watching it again, just because I know the finish, it just kind of bores me. It just bores me when I watch it again. But it was a really good match the first time, and that's it. I'm not a fan of gimmick matches. I don't like cages anymore. I don't like ladders, but anymore. That's just me. I'm old
All right,
school.
so moving along right into 95, the top. Want to read off the top three?
Sure. We had Bret Hart versus Diesel from Survivor Series, Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog from In Your House, and then Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon in the rematch of the ladder at SummerSlam that year. I'll go ahead and say it. I love this match. One of my favorite matches. It's Bret Hart versus Diesel from Survivor Series of that year when Diesel dropped the belt to Bret. I've never seen a match that was so slow and methodical, yet also so, it really, even though it was so slow, what I'm trying to say is I was still into it. And when I watch it again, I'm still really into it. Bret Hart does this thing with one of these TV cables from the outside of the ring, and he wraps Diesel's leg up in it, and he just works on the leg. And I still, to this day, I can't believe how interested I get in the match, because they just told a great story. And Diesel, I still watching it, I don't think Diesel's going to be able to beat Bret, or I'm sorry, Bret's going to be able to beat Diesel, but in the end he pulls a fast one on him, he rolls him up, and it's like, oh my, what an awesome way to lose the title. I was not a big fan of that title reign. I was not a big fan of Nash, Diesel as a wrestler, but to turn to he had sort of been teasing heel in the weeks leading up to that, dropping the title, and then he turned. What a great way to lose the title. Turn heel, lose it in that fashion, and then jackknife the crap out of the WWE's hero, Bret Hart. I thought it was great.
No, I definitely agree. It was very cutting edge, especially that's the first table bump I think that was ever done in the WWE. Also, I think the reason we like it so much and other people enjoy that match over the other ones is because Bret wins. I think the way he won it was an awesome finish, and I think you were just kind of at peace with Bret finally regaining the title. And Diesel's year-long reign was a disaster financially for the company, so that was finally over with. But yeah, just good storytelling. He worked at Nash's pace. And so I would have to be my pick as well. The Shawn versus Razor from SummerSlam was pretty awesome. I know reading Shawn Michaels' book, I remember he wasn't happy with it because they weren't allowed to use the ladder as a weapon. But I still think they salvaged that pretty smoothly, because you really that really doesn't hit you when you watch the match again. It was pretty exciting and still pretty innovative for that time, the Shawn Razor ladder match from '95. And Bret and Bulldog, the rematch. I don't know. There's some camera problems, and I thought that finish was weak when he asked Jericho for help with that Mexican style finish. That just didn't work for me. It was still pretty awesome though, with all the blood.
Weak finish.
It was pretty hardcore, but I don't know. I just feel like the fans really weren't as invested.
Every time I watch it, I go, weak finish. That's my only problem with that.
All right,
match.
so let's move on to '96.
Okay, we have Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels in the Iron Man match. We had Shawn Michaels and Mick Foley in the Mind Games match, and we had Bret Hart versus Austin at Survivor Series.
All right, so let me say this. It's something I've noticed being on YouTube over the last 5 years or whatever is whenever I praise the Iron Man match, I actually ranked it as my favorite WrestleMania match of all time, and a lot of people really disagree with that. They think the match is boring, and they think it's highly overrated. If we do like a list of the most overrated matches, I bet you most people will vote for Shawn and Bret from WrestleMania as the most overrated match. But to me, I like it. I think it's a match you just have to watch all the way through. I feel like it builds anticipation, as the match progresses. I understand it's very slow in the beginning, but to me that doesn't make it a bad match. I think all of Shawn's big moves just feel special. I thought during the match Bret looked like a killer. I felt like Bret was definitely the aggressor throughout most of the match. So it was pretty interesting to see how Shawn would kind of overcome him as the match progressed. So in my opinion, it's still the greatest WrestleMania match of all time, and I still think it's Shawn's best WrestleMania match.
To argue for that match, I think it's kind of like when you go in to see a Coen's Brothers movie, or you go in to see like, I don't know the name of the director, but a movie like There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis. It's a very slow and methodical movie. It goes near 3 hours. You have to go into it with the understanding that this is going to be a long match and it's going to take time to build up. When I don't do that, like for some long Ring of Honor matches, like I don't enjoy the match because I don't realize, like, okay, I need to go in with the understanding this is going to be a long match. But that's why I love that match so much. You know, I'm having a hard time with this because I love the Mind Games match with Mick Foley.
Well, most people would say the Mind Games would win. If we had a poll, most people would pick the Mind Games.
I'm torn. I think I'm torn. I don't know if I can pick one, but I love that match too. I love everything that happens in that match. That match is it's ridiculous what they do in that match. It's insane. And at the time, it was insane. Some of the things that Shawn Michaels and Foley did in that match were crazy for that, especially at that time. And WWE needed an edge, and because ECW was doing their thing and WCW was doing their thing, and they were very edgy in that match. That's a split. I'm gonna say those two are a tie. Bret and HBK for technical wrestling and just awesome mat wrestling, and then Mind Games with Foley just for going over the edge.
Yeah. If we had to pick a third, I think you go Bret and Austin from Survivor Series, but I wouldn't say it's anywhere near the other two. It really set the tone for Bret and Austin, what would come later on. But all right, so let's go to '97. We have the two classics. It's really a two-way race. You have Bret Hart and Steve Austin from WrestleMania 13, and then you have Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, Hell in a Cell from, what was it, Bad Blood of '97.
Yeah,
what would you have to what would you have to pick between those two if you had to pick one?
Even though Austin had that moment at WrestleMania 13 where he sort of turns face and he's bleeding in the sharp sheet, even though that's like probably one of the greatest WrestleMania moments ever. As a match, I'm gonna pick Shawn Michaels and Undertaker in Hell in a Cell. I thought it was a better match. When I watched the Bret Hart Austin match back, I get a little bored with the stuff they do in the crowd. There was this big thing in WWE at the time, but they always had to wrestle in the crowd. It bored the crap out of me. But HBK and Taker, a lot of it took place right in the ring, right inside the cell. Stuff going on outside the cell. Shawn Michaels was getting beat by like a rag doll. Selling like nobody else can sell, and so I'm going to pick HBK and Taker, Hell in a Cell.
I think, if you saw Shawn and Undertaker for the first time without ever seeing, when you watch, if someone had watched that live, you must have said to yourself, holy shit, I've never seen anything like this before.
Right.
Especially with going on top of the cage, taking the table bump off of the cell, hanging off of the cell, Kane ripping the door off the cell. That was just like, stuff that was never ever seen before. So I can understand why some people might pick it, but because of Austin's intensity, and Bret and Austin, the level of hatred that they had, just the intensity and just the way that match, kind of altered business for the WWE. I would have to pick Bret Hart and Austin.
You're gonna pick Hart and Austin just because?
I agree with the stuff in the crowd, but I could overlook that because the last 10 minutes were just so magical.
I did watch HBK Taker back because I always thought, it's not going to top Mankind and Taker from the year later because, the falls weren't as huge.
Oh, yeah.
But then I watched, it's like, it is a really good match. What they do in the match is actually really good. And the fact that Michaels beats the crap out of a cameraman, and that actually ends up being why the door to the cell ends up getting opened up, I thought was pretty edgy, because I thought Michaels was actually just beating him up because he was an asshole. That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
And I think our third was the Canadian Stampede main event.
I don't know very much.
You don't remember that, right?
Nope.
You don't remember that? Wow, you don't remember that?
No, I remember what it was like, and the environment and the crowd must have been off the chain. But
all right, so at '98.
We have, in 1998, our picks, our nominees are Undertaker and Mankind from Hell in a Cell, King of the Ring, Austin versus Dude Love from, what is that, Over the Edge?
Over the Edge, yeah.
Over the Edge, and then Rock and Triple H at SummerSlam in the ladder match.
So what would be your pick?
Oh, that's a tough one for me. I guess out of those three, I'd pick Undertaker and Mankind from the Hell in a Cell.
Pick it over Austin and Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania?
Okay, well, Austin and Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 14, a lot of people don't put that on their list, but I actually thought that match was quite good because I thought it was a great moment with Mike Tyson coming in at the, counting the three. I also think it's the greatest Stone Cold Stunner because Shawn Michaels, I love the way he sold the stunner. I'm just a nerd when it comes to that. But if that's not one of the nominees, I understand, because a lot of people are not like, okay, that wasn't a great match. I would pick Taker and Mankind only because of the amazing things that Foley did in this match, putting his life on the line. And if you watch back at the hysteria that goes on with everybody, going after Foley to see if he's okay. And even after Foley gets thrown through the cell, it was either after he gets thrown through the cell or off the cell, the match actually continues. And what they actually do is actually pretty good wrestling. They're pretty good hardcore wrestling. It's not just a guy being thrown off the cell twice. They actually have a wrestling match in there.
There was a mandible claw spot, and then there was a electric chair on thumbtacks. So they actually did some other stuff.
Yeah. It's pretty. Foley goes all the way with that match. Well, what's your pick from that year?
I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I just want to say this about Austin and Foley from Over the Edge. The cool thing about that is you had Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels out of the company, and then all of a sudden you had these two guys that were fired from WCW out there in a WWF main event, and they had like the crowd in the palm of their hands. Austin, that was like at the apex of Austin's popularity. So I just think it was cool how you have your two biggest stars leave, and you have these guys that were just fired from WCW, and they can main event your show and be just as over as anyone that the company's had in the last decade. I just think that's kind of funny how the business works.
That's an interesting observation. I wouldn't have thought about it that way.
But if I had to pick one, I would probably go with Taker and Mankind, because that's just life or death stuff. That was just that's just someone just going out there and just saying fuck it. We're putting everything on the table because this is life or death, and it really I think that's. Stuff like that is what really separated, the WWF from the competition.
Absolutely, yeah. In 1999, we had The Rock and Mankind, The Rock and Mankind from the Royal Rumble, Rock and Austin from WrestleMania, and the Hardys versus Edge and Christian. We also had the Six-Pack Challenge on there as a fourth nominee from that.
Yeah, you haven't seen that, though. That's pretty good. If anyone hadn't seen it on YouTube, when Triple H wins the title back, I think it's like his second title win. It's in a Six-Pack Challenge. The crowd and the match flowed very well, so just check that out. I wouldn't put that as number one, but I think Rock and Mankind from the Royal Rumble '99, it just it's one of those matches that has its own identity. If someone handcuffs somebody, someone will say, "Oh, shades of the Royal Rumble of '99." Foley taking all those chair shots. The Rock was just that was The Rock at his best. This one, he had a lot of charisma and he was funny. He was calling everyone a piece of monkey crap. He was just, to me, he was at the top of his game. So I'll go with Rock and Mankind.
I think it was a continuation of what Foley was willing to do. It was brutal to what he was willing to do to put his body on the line there, and taking chair shot after chair shot. His kids were I think his kids were in the crowd or backstage on Beyond the Mat, the documentary. What a great documentary that was. That documentary actually showed you before and after the match him talking to his children and what he had to go through, and it showed The Rock and Foley sort of talking about how The Rock was going to hit him with the chair, and I think The Rock kept on hitting him with the chair in the wrong spot of his head. I'm sure that happens, but that was just a brutal match, and it was just too memorable not to be to me, that was the one that stands out from that year. Yeah.
All right, so move on to 2000.
Yeah, in 2000 we had Jericho versus Triple H in a last man standing match from Fully Loaded. Triple H and Cactus Jack from the Royal Rumble. The TLC and also the TLC SummerSlam match with the Hardys, Dudley Boys, and Edge and Christian. And then finally, a fourth nominee I threw on there was the Iron Man match with Triple H and The Rock with Shawn as special guest ref. That's a tough one.
All right, so out of all those, I'm going to go with Jericho and Triple H from Fully Loaded. I don't know, for some reason the WWF doesn't see this as the classic that I see it. To me, it just never bored me. I just felt like it was an all-out war, especially with Triple H being at the top of his game and really showed that ass kicker Edge and Jericho and the whole Jericho Stephanie McMahon that feud, their interaction,
Great
was
feud.
pretty good in that match, and just very, very violent, bloody, exciting, action packed, everything I could ask for. It was kind of short, but to me, that's the best match of that year.
That's a good point. It was a short match, but the psychology of it was really, really good. And the feud leading into that match was going on for quite a few months, actually, because Jericho had been, been saying things about Stephanie, and finally it got, it bubbled up, and Triple H, he made it personal. So and just not too long before that, when Triple H had been champion. He wasn't champion in this match, but Jericho had beaten Triple H on Raw for the title, but it was a fast count by Earl Hebner, and then Triple H had them overturn it. These people weren't here. They never saw it happen. Earl overturned it, and they took the title back away from Jericho. That was such an exciting moment. I love that moment, by the way. But leading into this match, when this match finally happened, I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this is huge. Jericho beat Triple H for the title. They took it back from Jericho, and Jericho had his ribs taped throughout that whole match. So that was an amazing, amazing match. And I want to say it's my number one, but I think I might be torn again, because Triple H and Cactus Jack from the Royal Rumble, that was another just amazing match. Not just because of the brutality, not just because of the hardcore legend, but because of this video is a lot about Foley. But because I didn't think that was going to happen, but because I don't know. Every time I see one of those wooden plank things, one of those wooden stacks, that they have at construction sites, I think of the Royal Rumble 2000 when Cactus Jack actually did a back body dropped Triple H onto it, and he got a piece of wood stuck in his leg.
The wooden pallet.
The wooden pallet
stuck in his calf muscle.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to have to say that I'm going to pick Cactus Jack and Triple H from the Royal Rumble, because it was more of a marathon, and by the end of it, I was just like, I had no air left.
Yeah, it's crazy. I never thought about that before. You could argue that Foley had the best match in 98, 99, and 2000.
Never thought about it. You don't give him credit. He's not pretty, but he made it happen.
All right, so let's jump to 2001. I think 2001 is great. I think, the top 10 to 15 matches of that year, it could be the best year if you're just looking at its top 10 to 15 in terms of, match quality and epic pay-per-view matches. But to me, it's pretty easy one. I think Rock and Austin from WrestleMania X7, just the emotion and the kickouts and the heel turn. It's just one of those. It's just a moment that's never going to be duplicated. And I love Austin's heel reign. So to me, has a very special place in my heart. So that's it for me. But this was Austin's year. Austin had so many great matches. What was your pick for 2001?
I was just going to say, he was put in so many great situations. They really ran with him, finally, because he had been injured in 2000 and 99. He was kind of halfway, so they finally ran with Austin. Really, they really wanted to milk him in 2001. Personally, I have to pick Austin and Angle from SummerSlam. There's something magical about that match. It wasn't a pretty match, but I just loved Angle's ferocity. Angle was busted open and bleeding, and he put Austin in the ankle lock, and it was just it was awesome.
Well, the Austin and Angle, some people, it was kind of overlooked by a lot of people, but some people that are really hardcore will tell you that it's just a very, very well-defined story. It's very, very clear-cut, and they stick to the formula, and it just made for a great story in terms of babyface versus heel. Austin just being cynical and sadistic, Angle obviously the American, the hero, the savior. They just told a really great story, even though it was a DQ.
It was a DQ, and it's funny. Usually we hate it when we see a DQ. Every time I see a DQ on a pay-per-view, I go, what is this, 1995? But this was a case where they had given me everything I could have asked for in a match. Everything they did made sense according to what their feud was. I went into it not necessarily expecting this real hatred between the two, and that's what they gave me. And Angle was so intense, and I didn't think that I could hate Austin that much. I hated him. I bought into it, and I friggin' hated Austin. And oh my God, I loved it. I thought that's one of my favorite matches of all time. I get chills down my spine thinking of how intense Kurt Angle was when he put what's his name, Neil Patrick, or not Neil Patrick, whatever.
Nick
the referee,
Patrick, yeah, WCW referee.
I'm thinking of Neil Patrick Harris. He puts him in the ankle lock at the when the match was over. He's amazing. Love it. See that match.
Yeah, you all said Austin and Triple H from No Way Out. I know you're not crazy about that, but
yes, I mean that was a marathon match. It was three ways from hell, or three
stages of hell. Yeah, you also have Benoit Jericho from the Rumble. You had the Angle Benoit matches. You had the Rob Van Dam Jeff Hardy matches from Invasion and SummerSlam. We could go on and on. There's just so much stuff. Oh, Kurt Angle versus Shane McMahon. The Rock versus Chris Jericho.
Oh my God!
This is the best year as far as main event quality pay-per-view matches. So, yeah. So all right. So let's go into 2002. Read them off.
Shane McMahon. That was an amazing match. The nominees are for 2002. 02 is Shawn Michaels and Triple H from SummerSlam. The Elimination Chamber match from Survivor Series. Angle and Benoit versus Edge Mysterio. Edge and Mysterio from No Mercy, and then also Brock Lesnar and Undertaker in the Hell in a Cell.
So those would be the top four. 2002, the top 10 and the top 15 or whatever. It's probably not as strong as 2001, but I think it has more depth than 2001. Like there's just so many great TV matches that year with the SmackDown 6. That's pretty well documented. A lot of different
guys involved in that. The other ones all had Austin. This has got different,
great talent, great variety. All right, so I would go with Triple H and Shawn Michaels from SummerSlam. Obviously, Shawn's magical comeback, the video package gets you so pumped up. The ending, the sledgehammer. SummerSlam 2002 is my favorite show of all time, and that's the best match on that show. So I got to go with that.
That's my favorite show of all time. I got to give a shout out to Angle versus Mysterio at that show. I love that match. That match isn't one of the nominees, but if I had to pick from this list and for that whole year, same here. Shawn Michaels and Triple H. God, that was amazing. I'll never forget that. He came back and we thought, okay, he's just going to come back, do a super kick, whatever, and it's not going to be that big of a deal.
I tell you,
he was coming back.
I didn't expect much out of Hogan's return or Shawn Michaels' return, and they both. I really surpassed expectations.
That's true. They weren't just coming back to talk on commentary. They came back. They were for legit. So hell yeah.
So let's move on to 2003.
We got Angle and Benoit from the Royal Rumble. Shawn Michaels and Jericho from WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar and Angle from WrestleMania. And Eddie and Benoit from, what was the name of that paper? Vengeance, yes.
SmackDown.
Okay, that's an interesting one. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and I got to say, that's a tough one for me.
2003 is weird. These four matches are all pretty awesome. But, this is pretty much all you got from 03 as far as in terms of, classic matches. There's a lot of good matches from 2003 on TV. But as far as pay-per-view matches go, these are four really quality matches in my opinion. I got to go with Angle and Benoit from the Royal Rumble. Obviously, it's my favorite match of all time. This is the match I show people that don't know anything about pro wrestling. I've talked about it so many times. There's nothing more I could say about it. I know some people have their gripes with it, but I'm not going to talk about it. Because I've talked about it plenty of times. We did a whole video about it.
Oh, I'm sure. We'll do another video about it. Shawn Michaels and Jericho comes as a close second, but I agree. I haven't watched it in a long time, but Angle and Benoit, I always think back to that match.
The proof is a standing ovation. If the match really wasn't that great, Benoit would have never got that kind of ovation. And let's face it, Benoit really wasn't ultra popular at that time. It wasn't like he was the most over guy in the company. But by the end of that match, you had... How many times can you watch a match in pro wrestling and have everybody on standing up, giving an ovation?
They were in the U.S. for that too, right? It was in the United States. Yeah. It was not like it was in Edmonton. I mean, they really turned the crowd.
Yeah,
and
I think a lot of it had to do with Triple H and Scott Steiner because you see all the hype for Triple H and Steiner and it just sucked.
True.
And then you see Angle and Benoit, these two guys just leaving it all in the ring. You just see the effort and the heart that Benoit had when he locked him in the crossface. You just saw so much emotion, and I think that's what really sold the crowd.
We're doing a video about greatness, and you mentioned Triple H and Scott Steiner? Oh, man. Let's move on to 2004. Jesus. For 2004, we've got Orton and Foley at Backlash in a no-holds-barred match. We got Chris Benoit versus Shawn Michaels versus Triple H at WrestleMania, and then we have Eddie Guerrero versus Brock Lesnar at, I believe it was No Way Out.
All right, let me start this off. All right, they're going to release a Shawn Michaels Mr. WrestleMania DVD in February.
Okay.
And there's only one match that's not going to be on the compilation.
And that's the triple
And that's
threat.
this one, yeah.
Of course,
Just wanted
they
to say
can't
that.
have
But
that
yeah, my
one
pick,
there.
obviously when Benoit won the belt in the triple threat, I got to go with that. I think Eddie Guerrero and JBL from Judgment Day, that's one match that people didn't want to see, but as time has gone on, that's kind of become, I got to say that's one of the best ones as well.
It's a crazy
But
match.
2004, the first half of that year was pretty spectacular. Foley and Orton was pretty awesome. Eddie and Brock from No Way Out was just another magical moment. 2004, every single pay-per-view for the first 4 or 5 months just had these, magical moments where you just, you're hugging your friends if you watch the pay-per-view.
Well, we were all Benoit fans at the time, of course, and we were all Eddie Guerrero fans. So it was an awesome year to be a pro wrestling fan, especially because if you are a pro wrestling fan, you were always, if you were a fan of the in-the-ring wrestling, Benoit and Guerrero were, from the days they were in ECW, WCW, you knew that they could go better than anybody else in the ring. So they were our guys, so that's why we loved that year, because our heroes, they were the guys winning. I'll pick the triple threat match too. That's the one that stands out.
So you're a big fan of the WrestleMania 20 triple threat, but not the Backlash?
I like the Backlash one, but the Backlash one, it was like, okay, we're doing it again as a sequel. It was still a really good match.
That would have been awesome if it was just Benoit versus Shawn Michaels. That would have been so
oh
much
my
better.
God, yes.
Why the fuck didn't that happen?
Oh, I don't know. I
don't
don't know. That was a missed opportunity. They could have. They still teased the screw job thing.
Yeah, I know.
They still teased it.
Yeah, that's addition by subtraction right there. But let's move on to 2005. 2005 is pretty obvious. I think 2005 was a really good year, actually. Batista, the Eddie Guerrero, the Eddie Guerrero Rey Mysterio feud. I think Matt Hardy and Edge had a solid feud. John Cena had some good stuff with Jericho. But Angle and Michaels from WrestleMania 21. It's a match that I really wanted to see. I just didn't know how WWE was going to present it to us. And it was kind of weird how they did it because, Raw and SmackDown were so separate at the time. But, it's one of those matches, you had the two best wrestlers in the company. Just a dream match for me because you never seen anything or any interaction between Angle and Michaels. They didn't really have any history together. But I thought the WWE did somewhat of a good job of making the match feel like it made sense with, Shawn won the belt in 96, Angle won the gold medal in 96.
Oh.
So they did their best to kind of make it feel special, and it was pretty awesome.
I totally forgot about that. That's kind of cool, actually. Actually, believe it or not, this is actually one of my favorite Shawn Michaels matches. This might be my favorite Shawn Michaels match. I can't say it's the best match ever, but I love this match. This match, I get into this match every time I watch it. I'm always thinking Shawn's gonna submit. I think he's gonna submit, and then he doesn't, and then it keeps going, and it keeps going, and then they make it personal. They really get in each other's faces, and Shawn's like face to face, and then he fucking super kicks him. This is great. I love this match. That's my number one.
So what were the nominees for 2005?
Angle HBK WrestleMania, Angle HBK Vengeance, Eddie Mysterio from SummerSlam, and then Batista and Triple H from Hell in a Cell.
Yeah, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, they had a really good match on SmackDown from June of that year. That's pretty awesome as well. I also like the Angle Michaels Cena triple threat from Taboo Tuesday. I know most people don't like that. That's an underrated gem as well. I know you don't like that much, but yeah, man, Angle and Michaels. This was their year. They had a nice trilogy in 2005. All right, so 2006. Read off the nomination.
We've got Kurt Angle and Undertaker from No Way Out. We've got Edge and Mick Foley from WrestleMania 22, and then we have RVD and John Cena from
One Night Stand.
Yeah. Well, wow. What's your pick for that one?
That was pretty obvious. I think Angle and Undertaker pretty much had it. I just remember the counters. When I first saw it, I thought the counters to some of, Undertaker's moves, the counters to the tombstone into the ankle lock, a choke slam into the ankle lock, the finish of the match, which you liked, the pinning predicament out of the triangle choke.
I've never seen anybody do that before. I think Michaels, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's Angle.
No, but I was going to say, I think Michaels did that to Undertaker again. He countered the finish of the The finish of the No Way Out match with Kurt Angle and Undertaker was that he countered the Hell's Gate or the triangle choke, whatever it was, the triangle choke into a roll up, into a pinning predicament. And, you know, I thought it was amazing when Kurt Angle died. Before he did it, I was like, he's going to try and counter that.
But Shawn did it at WrestleMania
25. I think Shawn Michaels did it to Taker at WrestleMania 25 in a very similar way. It's really hard to do that. And I thought it was ballsy in this era, especially 2006. You know, you'd expect it to end with an ankle lock or some big giant angle slam or something like that. But instead, he did it in such a way that was like, you know, this was going to continue. They weren't going to stop fighting each other after this. And I thought that was one of the best technical matches, you know, I had seen in a long time. Once again, kind of slow and methodical. You know, not the most exciting match, but I thought that would probably be my pick for that year.
Yeah, Angle and Undertaker is definitely my pick. But when you think of 2006, you think of Edge and John Cena. Yeah, Cena and Edge had a great match at a TLC match in Unforgiven. I know you don't remember much about it.
No, I kind of
yeah, 2006 was a pretty dark year. I thought there were some good things about the first half with, you know, ECW and Rob Van Dam, and, you know, Edge had a great year. But the second half of that year, you could definitely tell WWE started to go really downhill.
RVD versus Cena was an amazing moment.
Amazing atmosphere.
And the atmosphere was crazy. I do have a lot of respect for John Cena.
Yeah, that was.
Do that. I just don't like the finish.
Yeah, I want to watch that match.
I hate it when non-referees count the 3 count. It doesn't make any sense.
You know, the Paul Heyman finish. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, it just doesn't seem legit, right?
No, it doesn't seem legit. Paul Heyman counted the 3. He's not a referee. Why? It shouldn't count. So I.
All right, so 2007. 2007 was hit by a lot of injuries, but, you know, from Royal Rumble to WrestleMania and Backlash is a pretty awesome show as well. You had some really good stuff between Cena and Michaels and Batista and Undertaker. What was your pick for best match of 2007?
You know, I know Cena and Michaels had a match at WrestleMania. I recently watched, again, the Cena Michaels from Raw, though, and I thought that match had something more to it than the one at WrestleMania did. Definitely. It was a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, Jericho was a big fan of those matches as well. Kind of inspired him to come back as soon as he did. So I would say. Yeah, I would go with Cena and Michaels at WrestleMania just because it's a bigger stage. I love, you know, some people hated Cena selling in that match, but I just love some of the counters that they pulled off at the end. But, you know, I could agree, though, that the match on Raw was a lot longer, and they definitely did a lot more in that match.
Right.
But, yeah, Taker and Batista from WrestleMania was good. I thought the Fatal 4-Way from Backlash was really good, looking back on it. But, yeah, 2007, after Backlash, they just had a really tough time that year with, you know, injuries over the summertime. But, yeah, so that was 2007. So let's move on to 2008. Just name them off.
So the nominees are Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 24, HBK and Jericho at No Mercy, and Edge and Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell at SummerSlam.
So yeah, it's 2008. This is one of the first years. I think it was a good year, actually. You know, I think of Jericho and his, you know, heel run with Shawn Michaels. That was a great feud in 2008. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I think this is one of the first years where a lot of stuff starts to get a little blurry with the recent years. Mm-hmm. But what would be your pick?
I guess once again, I'm sorry, guys. I don't have a lot of knowledge 2008 and some of these years, not until 2011. But I'd have to say Flair versus Michaels just for the moment. I thought it was a solid match, and I thought it was a good match. And then the moment was just so huge, ending Ric Flair's career. So that's the one I have to pick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with Jericho and Michaels from No Mercy, the ladder match. It was a great ladder match. You know, I probably have to watch it again to really go into depth to really defend it. But it goes back to the Jericho-Michaels feud. I thought it was a great feud. They had a heated confrontation at SummerSlam. Each pay-per-view kept building, and then they finally made the decision to put Jericho as the champion and take the title off of Punk, which I actually think I think it was a good decision actually. You know, I don't like the fact that they took the title off of Punk. I think probably there would have been a better way to do it. But, you know, I can't argue. Jericho was hot at the time. The feud was hot. And it was a great blow-off to the Jericho-Michaels feud. So
could have done it in a better way. But it is what it is. In 2009...
Well, first of all, I don't blame... Well, let me just say this. I don't blame it on Punk. It's just... nothing against him, but why are you going to make someone your champion if you don't want him to be the champion, or if you don't think he's cut out to be the champion? And it goes back to Money in the Bank. which is why the Money in the Bank thing doesn't always
Well,
work.
I'm glad. You know what? I'm glad that happened, because if stuff like that didn't happen, then the promo that CM Punk eventually cut wouldn't have happened, and
Wouldn't have felt as good.
wouldn't have felt
That's
as
one
good.
of the most frustrating things. Yeah.
In 2009, we have Undertaker and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25. Y2J versus Mysterio.
From the Bash.
From the Great American Bash.
No, it's just called the Bash.
Okay, it's just the Bash. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you didn't watch wrestling that
I didn't
year.
watch it. No, I did not. And then the Raw Elimination Chamber at SummerSlam. Or not at SummerSlam.
No, the Raw Elimination Chamber from No Way Out.
From No Way Out.
Let me explain it. Like how many times have you seen Elimination Chamber matches nominated? This was the one when Edge lost the title in the beginning of the show. He lost the WWE title, and then at the end of the show, he attacked Kofi Kingston and entered himself into the world title Elimination Chamber match, and he actually pulled off the upset. They took the belt off of Cena, which was a shock to everybody, and so Edge won the World Championship at the end. Just really awesome stuff between Edge, Mysterio, and Cena to end that Elimination Chamber. This was definitely one of the best Elimination Chamber matches. I think True Slayer even gave this 5 stars when it came out, which was a big deal, because he was one of the only guys who watched reviews of it at that time. But 2009, obviously Shawn Michaels and Undertaker doesn't really come close. It's one of the greatest WrestleMania main events of all time. I don't think anyone expected Taker and Shawn just to blow people away like they did. I mean, even you watched the match again. You want to talk about it?
I just recently watched it again for like the 3rd time. I've actually seen the one from 26, the year later, more. But this one, I think I've seen 3 times. And this one, without a doubt, is I mean, it's like the best match I've ever seen. Even watching it for the 3rd time, it was like I was standing up, like I had no air in me at the end of the match.
Yeah.
I was just like, I couldn't. It was so amazing.
Yeah, when Undertaker kicked out of the what was
When
it?
Shawn
Kicked out of the tombstone.
That was the first
the facial
time.
expression. Everyone lost their mind.
Everybody lost their mind. That was good. Shawn Michaels has some balls, doesn't he? To kick out of the tombstone like that. Obviously, he's done it, and CM Punk did it, since then. But to be the first person to kick out of the tombstone,
He's the
like
first person
that,
that ever kicked out.
to kick out of in that fashion, I think Kane might have kicked out of it, but that was different because Kane was the monster Kane. He kicks out of
WrestleMania
anything.
14. Right?
Yeah, but no, who would have expected him to kick out of a freaking tombstone?
No, nobody did.
I wouldn't have. That was
Even if the match ended there, it still would have been match of the
that's
year.
what I said. It still would have been one of the best matches I've ever seen, and he just took it home. He said, "We're gonna do the best."
All right, cool, man. Yeah, I'm glad you got to watch it again because that is definitely the better one, and it's a I think even Jericho said it's the greatest match of all time. I think he said it on the WrestleMania documentary.
It might not be my favorite, but it's amazing.
Like I can't argue if you think it's that good, I can't argue with you. All right, so we'll move on to 2010, and this was a bad year, and once again it's pretty obviously Taker HBK the rematch, easily the WWE match of the year. But I mean, anything from 2010 you remember? I mean, they had a Nexus feud. Danny Bryan got fired. There were some dark days in 2010. 2010 was like the last year where I feel like the WWE really just didn't know what the fuck they were doing and really wasn't giving us what we wanted. We got The Miz as champion. We had Wade Barrett in the main event. Just, I don't know. I just feel like they've gotten a lot better as far as, judging what people like. And 2010 was a pretty frustrating year with the John Cena storylines and all that stuff. But,
maybe that might be a reflection. I could be wrong. That could be a reflection of, now it's time to make new stars. And I think Daniel Bryan started feuding with Michael Cole, and they started, really pushing this indie wrestler thing with him. And CM Punk was still sort of under the radar,
Straight Edge Society
off the
at that
radar.
time,
He's doing, which I watched the DVD, CM Punk DVD. That seemed like that was a really cool thing that they were a part of. So I think it was. I think that's a reflection of the WWE needing to make new stars.
Yeah.
When you say that your greatest matches at WrestleManias are 2 guys who were stars back in the '90s, Undertaker and
you
Shawn
got one guy
Michaels.
who's retiring, and you got one guy who's not going to wrestle again until next year.
Right, exactly. He only wrestles once a year. So, and don't get me wrong, I love those matches, but your stars need to have the best matches of the year, not your part-time guys.
But what did you think of the retirement rematch? I mean, did you think that was cool?
Oh, great match. Amazing match. Not as good as 25, but still, amazing match. It's really, absolutely. Yeah.
And, all right, so 2010. You want to just read off the nominations?
For 2011?
No, 2010.
Oh, for 2010? We had Taker HBK, Daniel Bryan and Dolph Ziggler, And then
I'm sorry, Daniel Bryan Dolph Ziggler was from Bragging Rights.
And then WWE versus the Nexus. What was that?
From SummerSlam.
SummerSlam.
That's when Daniel Bryan. Remember, he got fired.
Yeah.
And then that's when he came back. So that was pretty awesome. That was a good feel good moment right there.
The final countdown. Sorry. Nobody liked my singing on the last video. I won't sing anymore. So 2011, the nominees are the SmackDown Elimination Chamber, Triple H versus Undertaker at WrestleMania, and John Cena versus CM Punk from Money in the Bank 2011.
It's pretty obvious.
I gotta choose John Cena and CM Punk for Money in the Bank. One of the greatest moments I've ever seen. So refreshing. Crowd was crazy. Not the prettiest match. Actually, no, when I watch it back, there are some, not botches, but almost botches in that match. But it didn't matter. The crowd was with CM Punk for every little thing, and it was amazing. The energy was just amazing. It was an amazing match. Amazing environment. I think that it's because of the environment and the crowd.
And the promo.
And of course, the promo leading into.
I mean, the promo. They just played clips of the promo in the video package, but you could feel that promo gave that crowd so much energy. There was just so much momentum and so much energy going into that match. Yeah. It was like God was coming out to say the savior of Chicago was coming out.
It didn't need to be in Chicago for him to get like a big reaction, but because it was in Chicago, it was.
It's just too good to be true. It's like how do you schedule that promo and the next pay-per-view being in Chicago like that?
I like to think that CM Punk was sort of thinking that. Yeah. I like to think that he's just sort of in, if it all falls through, if it all goes to hell, this is how I'm going to go out. And it's amazing that it ended up being the way it was. It was awesome. Yeah.
So what were the other nominees? All right, so we had the Raw elimination and the SmackDown Elimination Chamber. I think Edge retained the title. It came down to him and Mysterio, which it was really good stuff. What was the other nominee?
Triple H versus Undertaker at
WrestleMania 27. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of that. I just felt like it was forced. How Shawn faces the Undertaker and Triple H feels like it's his turn to go against Taker. I mean, how could you follow Shawn Michaels going against the Undertaker?
Yeah.
And how was Triple H going to compete with Shawn Michaels? That's my thing. I would just like to see something else happen. Because we've seen Triple H and Undertaker before.
Right. And there's just to me both. And we have Triple H and Taker.
I think the Hell in a Cell was pretty awesome, but I really didn't care for the 27 one.
Well, jumping into 2012, Triple H and Taker, Hell in a Cell from that WrestleMania. And then we had Punk and Jericho from that WrestleMania. Brock and John Cena from Backlash.
No, Extreme Rules.
Extreme Rules.
Sorry.
AKA, for me, it's Backlash. And then Punk versus Bryan at Over the Limit. The Triple H Taker Hell in a Cell match was a lot more exciting, I think, that year.
Shawn Michaels is referee.
Shawn Michaels was a special guest.
No, let me get your opinion on this. So some people thought Shawn Michaels ruined the match by overreacting from a lot of the kickouts. Remember that one time he was like selling the false finishes and.
I don't remember. I only saw the match one time. I don't remember. I wasn't looking at Shawn Michaels. I wasn't focusing on that. My criticism of this match is that it's too much with kicking out of these too many false finishes. It's just too much. Like just because it's WrestleMania and you're Undertaker and Triple H. I just think there's nothing clever about that. That's my opinion on that.
That's funny because I know Austin loved the match. He said it was great fucking storytelling, and I love the emotion from Triple H, and I did enjoy the kickouts and the overall story. Okay. But someone like Bret Hart didn't like the match. He said that I know how this is going to go. He said like Triple H had never had a good match before and stuff like that.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that. I think Triple H has had some great matches, but I think that shows where my mindset does come more.
It comes into taste, yeah.
I do have my taste is kind of like Bret's in a way, but I like so yeah.
So that'd be my pick for 2012.
That's your pick for 2012?
Yeah, I have to. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. But what would be yours?
CM Punk and Daniel Bryan at Over the Limit. I've watched that match like 5 times. I love that match. I love the technical wrestling in that match. I love that match. I think it's like Ring of Honor on WWE. It's great.
So that's all you gotta say about it.
That's all I gotta say. I thought the match was great. I have till.
Yeah, I mean the finish was kind of frustrating, but I really enjoyed it. It should have been you don't know. The reason it's frustrating for some fans is if you watch that pay-per-view, it wasn't the main event. The main event was John Cena versus John Laurinaitis, I think.
Well, that's a problem.
So I think that put a lot of bad taste in people's mouths. But I agree, though, man. It was awesome to see Punk and Bryan.
It was a great match.
Go at it.
You're right. The finish was kind of weak, but I think it's because that feud continued. You know, they didn't
they had a match at Money in the Bank.
Right,
yeah.
They wanted to make both guys look good.
Yeah, that was a big feud going into the summertime.
And Bryan does look great. Both of them look really good coming out of that match. If anything, Punk looks worse.
Here's the thing that I take from it. If you watch the old school Ring of Honor, it just seemed to me like Punk caught up to Bryan. Like in 2005, 2006, Daniel Bryan was so much better than Punk as far as technical wrestling goes. But I think at this point, I think Punk got a lot better, and he was pretty much at his level. Because let's be honest, if you watch some of the Punk and Danielson matches from ROH, you know, Danielson is obviously the much better wrestler.
I think in some ways Punk is just hitting his stride.
Yeah.
Now, in some ways, and we're about to talk about 2013. Punk has had a lot of matches that were like could have been better. You know, like you expected a lot out of Punk, but no, Bryan. That's the thing. Bryan's been really good for a long time. Bryan's challenge has been toning it down and being more WWE. And he's
mastered it. Yeah,
he's mastering it. The crowds are going freaking crazy for him. 2013, the nominees are CM Punk versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania, Daniel Bryan versus John Cena at SummerSlam, CM Punk versus John Cena on Raw, and then Brock Lesnar versus CM Punk at SummerSlam. What is your pick?
Well, the last video we did, we talked about this. I went with Brock and Punk from SummerSlam just for personal reasons. But it seems like most people are saying Cena and Punk was the match of the year. But that might have been the best Raw match of all time. I mean, they definitely had you on the edge of your seat. That was the #1 contender for WrestleMania, I believe. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty awesome as well. But yeah, I got to go with Brock and Punk, you know, just because I thought that was such a refreshing matchup. I've talked about it before, but yeah, what would be your pick?
That's a tough one for me. There are things about my two favorites are both from SummerSlam, Bryan and Cena. I thought that was actually those were two better main events than what we had at WrestleMania. Bryan
WrestleMania what?
WrestleMania 29.
What?
Because I didn't like Rock and Cena.
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah.
And while CM Punk and Taker was really good, it's you know, I mean, I thought it was kind of a replay of Michaels and Taker in some ways. It was still a great match. Don't get me wrong. Bryan and Cena and I'm going to pick Lesnar and Punk too.
Oh, I thought, yeah. You changed your pick.
No, I mean, I did. Well, if you remember in the last video, I changed my pick at the end of that one too.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Lesnar and Punk is my pick because I think it was really refreshing. It felt like an Attitude Era match in some ways, and Punk really used the chair in a very unique way to fight Lesnar. It was a very unique match to me. The only thing I don't like about it is I think Punk, it looks stupid when he chases Paul Heyman. Like, what are you, stupid? Of course, that's not going to work for you. Oh, here comes Lesnar. You know, that's the only thing I don't like about it. I love Bryan and Cena. I thought that match was great. I thought it was really good, but I think they can do better, so that's why it's not my
Cena
number
was
one.
injured. We had that big baseball sticking out of his elbow.
And what does that say? That was a great match, but I think they can do. I actually think they can do better.
I really thought after TLC that they were going to go with Cena as the heel versus Bryan in the main event of WrestleMania. I thought that would have been it.
You know.
But no, well, first of all, they're getting rid of the heels and baby faces thing. But I saw that. You know, I thought a rematch looked likely before TLC, but I don't think we're going to get it now.
You should do a video on what's going on with that heels and baby faces thing. That's going to change the company.
It's kind of been like that for a while. Like Cena's the reason why that's
happening. Is and it isn't, but I mean, Orton's a heel, you know. They still have heels. They still
you're right. They still got assholes. And
they still have people.
Guys.
Damien Sandow is technically a heel, but Fandango, whatever you want to call him, he's in the middle. He wrestles as heel, but the crowd goes crazy for him when he comes out. You know.
But I don't think they go crazy for him. I think that's kind of more of like they're antagonizing him. I kind of get it like that. But.
I don't know anymore. I think there is a blurring between heel and face. There has been for a long time, and I think that maybe they're right for doing that.
Yeah, I don't think we talked about it on camera, but I really thought that TLC segment on Raw before TLC with Cena and Orton was just an amazing segment. I thought John Cena cut the better promo, but they were both good. But I think when you had all those legends in the ring, I think that gave him like that extra, passion and that, that extra motivation. And I thought they sold that really well. But
I think I gotta say, I know there are a lot of Cena haters out there. I just respect this guy so much. I think he's one of the smartest promo guys ever to go out there with all these people booing him. I mean, yeah, he's got the kids and the women, but they're not as loud as the adolescent to 32-year-old guys. Those are the ones with all the anger and all the animosity, and they're booing the crap out of him. And he figures out a way to turn them on his side. And yeah, so he used Daniel Bryan to do it. But by the end of that promo, he had people cheering for everything he said. He had that crowd in the palm of his hands. And I think John Cena is one of the smartest people in the history of pro wrestling.
Yeah, that last segment on Raw was great. Just want to end it like this. Batista's coming back. I don't know if you're happy about it or excited about it, but
I'm sighing. Hey, whatever. Just as long as Daniel Bryan gets a shot at that title, that's all I want.
We're probably not going to do a video again, but what would be your updated WrestleMania card?
Video again.
But what would be your updated WrestleMania card right now?
Oh man, that's tough. If it were up to me, obviously I want to see Punk versus Bryan, in like an Iron Man match. I love those guys. But if this is for the champ,
no. When you have Randy Orton as the champion right now, do you think Randy Orton will make it to WrestleMania as the champion?
That probably makes sense. I could be wrong. Cena might win it back. Bryan might win it. Punk might actually.
I think Punk might win it at the Rumble, and then you could do Punk and Bryan at WrestleMania. That's the only way you could see
Bryan and Punk. I don't think it's going to happen. Here's what I think is going to happen. Okay, this is weird. Every decagonal, that's not a word, but every time WrestleMania reaches the end of its decade, WrestleMania 10, 20, there's always more than two guys involved.
No, we talked about that before.
Oh, I did? On
we did.
YouTube?
Yeah, we did.
We did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
All right, never mind. I think all four guys are going to be involved. Bryan, Punk, Cena, and Orton. They're all going to be involved somehow.
What about, you think they'll do Batista and Lesnar?
I
really wanted to see Batista and Lesnar in 2005, but right now I really don't give a shit about seeing that.
Drink a cup of coffee.
I'd rather them save Batista and Brock for later on, but
I have no interest in seeing Batista.
I don't want to see Brock and Undertaker either, right? Because they're going to have Brock lose. I just don't think the time is right. So that's the problem there. I'd rather see Brock and Randy Orton. I think Brock and Orton is a pretty fresh matchup.
It doesn't matter.
I would love to see CM Punk turn heel and side with Triple H and stuff like that, and go against Bryan. I think that would be cool. I think Cena should face Undertaker. I think now is the time to do it before they're both too old. And Brock versus Orton. What are you going to do with Batista? I don't know.
Coffee.
Maybe Triple H. Maybe you could do that.
Coffee.
So we'll see.
I'm sorry, guys, but I just don't want to see Batista do anything. I'm tired of seeing Batista. He's one of the reasons why I stopped watching pro wrestling. Now I'm turning into Stephen A. Smith. I'm the Stephen A. Smith of pro wrestling.
But Batista, I think, he was, until he got hurt. When he got hurt, he lost his momentum because, when he was still active, he still had that whole evolution storyline in the back of your mind, and it still made you respect him.
The storyline was cool, but the wrestler, he's just not there I'm sorry. He's just not, I just don't like him. That's just me.